should never exist, like Oscar winner Mr. Beast, or Stephen Miller nudes, or Bill Belichick speaks about his relationship with 24-year-old girlfriend. Now, Semisonic denounced that video, saying we did not authorize or condone the White House's use of our song in any way. The song is about joy and possibilities and hope, and they have missed the point entirely. And of course they have, because according to the band's drummer, the song's about the anticipation of fatherhood, a song about being sent forth from the womb as if by a bouncer clearing out a bar. And obviously, Liz, we all knew that and got it from the lyrics. It's closing time, you're a baby, get out of that uterus and finish your whiskey and beer. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. It seems every day brings terrible news concerning deportation policy, some of which has been so surreal, local news has had to run fact checks on it, like in this sponsored segment.
Tonight's Fact or Fiction is brought to you by America's Finest Carpet.
Tonight, we're looking into a comment allegedly made by the head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. A story that you may have seen today claims acting ICE Director Todd Lyons said that he would like the agency to be run like Amazon Prime for human beings. And this is true.
Yeah, it is true. And spare a quick thought for that station and its sponsor, America's Finest Carpet. Because verifying ICE's director wanted to expel humans with the speed of a pack of emergency tampons on same-day delivery clearly isn't what their fact or fiction segment is for. It's for getting to the bottom of actual questions they've answered, like sharks test positive for cocaine, woman arrested for cinnamon roll attack, and Ford creates very gay raptor, which you'll be pleased to know was very much fact. But the intention behind that Amazon Prime idea gets to something important here. For all this administration's talk of prioritising hardened criminals, in practice, it seemed to value speed, volume and spectacle over all else. Perhaps best summed up by the fact, at a rally on Tuesday, Trump directed the audience's attention to a grotesque video of men getting deported to a Salvadoran prison, being marched off an airplane and having their heads shaved, prefacing it by telling the cheering crowd those men were the worst of the worst. Despite the fact, when 60 Minutes looked into it, they couldn't find criminal records for 75% of the men on those flights. And Trump's own administration has conceded that at least one man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, was sent there due to an administrative error. For weeks now, it has been scrambling to come up with reasons why it was okay to send that man to a foreign prison, which has been hard for them to do, given that he had a court order protecting him from deportation to El Salvador and no criminal record. At one point, Trump posted a photo of himself holding an image that had been circulating online of Abrego Garcia's hand, with labels added suggesting the tattoos on his knuckles was somehow secret code spelling out MS-13. Multiple gang experts have disputed that, pointing out MS-13 tattoos tend to feature things like the letters M, S, and the numbers 1 and 3. But in an interview on Tuesday, Trump not only defended posting that image, he argued that the letters and numbers that had clearly been superimposed were actually tattooed on his hand, and he refused to let go of that idea for an agonizingly long time. And while you may have seen small clips of this exchange, it is worth watching the full 90 seconds because it is absolutely incredible.
The man that you picked out, he said he wasn't a member of a gang, and then they looked, and on his knuckles he had MS-13.
There's a dispute.
Wait a minute. He had MS-13 on his knuckles.
He had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was Photoshop. So let me
That was Photoshop. Terry, he had that. Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You know, you're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. I picked you, Terry. Hey, but you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry, do you want me to show you the picture?
I saw the picture.
And you think it's Photoshop? Well,
Here we go.
Don't Photoshop it. Go look at his hand. He had MS-13.
He did have tattoos that can be interpreted that way. I'm not an expert on them. I want to turn to Ukraine.
No,
I want to get to Ukraine.
No. He had MS as clear as you can be, not interpreted. This is why people no longer believe, the news, because
When
it's
he was
fake
photographed
news.
in El Salvador, they aren't there. But let's just go. They aren't there when he's in El Salvador.
They're there now, right?
No,
But
they're in the picture.
Terry,
Ukraine's.
he's got MS-13 on his knuckles. Okay?
We'll take a look.
It's such a disservice.
We'll take a look at
Why
that.
don't you just say, yes, he does, and, go on to something else?
It's contested.
Terry, Terry, you're in hell, Terry. Terry, this is hell right now. I'm genuinely shocked Trump doesn't drink alcohol because that is the most drunk at an IHOP conversation I think I've ever heard. And no disrespect to Terry, but maybe don't move on from that. I know you've got other questions to get to, but if the President of the United States is trying to tell you that this amateur hour Photoshop is real, let him go get the picture and make him say it again. Point to that Helvetica-looking M and make the President say, yes, I believe that artless M that's weirdly clearer and darker than all the other tattoos is real. Make him say, I believe that man went to a tattoo parlor and said, the skull's pretty spooky, but what I'd really like is a neatly aligned 3 directly on the bone of my knuckle. And can you please make it so that it doesn't stretch or bend with the natural curves of the human hand, and also make it look like a typewriter did it? Because, Terry, sometimes when Trump's doing his normal racist blue sky, you do need to cut him off to slow the flow of hatred into the world. But if he wants to tell America that this laughably doctored picture is evidence of a major threat to American safety, you have an obligation to let the man cook. And for what it's worth, if Trump's going to hash out those claims, he probably should be doing that in court, not on TV, and after he's already shipped someone off to a foreign prison. But Abrego Garcia is just one of many horrifying stories surrounding immigration right now, from tourists being detained for weeks, to US citizens being caught up in ice strap nets, to videos like this.
You can see an agent using a large hammer to break the back passenger window of their car. Mary Lou said the agents were focused on her husband, Juan, but kept calling him Antonio. That's the name of another man who lives in their building. Thinking this is a case of mistaken identity, Juan called his attorney, who told him to stay in the car until she got there. But instead of waiting for their lawyer, the agents smashed the car window, broke into the vehicle, and dragged the couple out.
They have no reason to detain him. We've been following the rules of this country. We're doing things the right way. That's why we have a lawyer.
Right. They're trying to do things the right way. We have an asylum process in place. And while it is not perfect, I don't think a key step in it is guy smashes your car with a hammer while screaming someone else's name at you. And that's just the tip of the iceberg here. So given that tonight, let's look at Trump and deportations, the aggression of his administration's crackdowns, its blatant contempt for the law, and where this could be heading. Let's start with the fact Trump's off to a much quicker start than last time around. In its first 100 days, this administration has taken 181 immigration-specific executive actions, a 6-fold increase over that same period in Trump's first term. And that is deliberate. As the head of one anti-immigration group, the device of the White House has put it, the plan has been to do everything all at once, everywhere, which sounds less like rational government policy and more like a knockoff DVD sold on the subway. And to do that, they've employed a wide variety of tactics. Sometimes they've gotten creative by looking through old statutes or cheat codes to expedite deportations. We've talked before about how they've tried using an obscure provision of the Immigration and Nationality Act to remove people if the Secretary of State has reasonable ground to believe their presence here would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences. That is the reason they gave for arresting students like Mahmoud Khalil. And while that was clearly a targeted attempt to frighten students out of voicing solidarity with Palestine, they've also taken much broader swings, using a federal database that tracks even the slightest interactions with law enforcement to revoke visas and put thousands of international students in jeopardy. And some of the cases have been truly absurd, like this grad student who suddenly told he had 15 days to leave the country.
Suguru Anda, getting a PhD at Brigham Young University in Utah, had his legal status in the U.S. suddenly revoked after a criminal records check. But Anda, from Japan, had no criminal charges on his record, just 2 speeding tickets and a citation for catching 1 too many fish, his attorney says.
That is ridiculous. If you can be flagged for deportation for catching 1 too many fish, then I truly fear for Henry Winkler. We could be just days away from seeing him in an El Salvador prison, which I'm sure the White House will then justify by badly photoshopping an MS-13 tattoo onto his neck. And while they later reversed that specific decision, this all feels like the inevitable result of a campaign that fear-mongered about an epidemic of so-called migrant crime, which, as we've discussed before, was wildly overblown. But having promised mass deportations and even printed signs for people to wave around demanding them, they're now scrambling to deliver. While the administration denies it, ICE officials have reportedly been told to aggressively ramp up the number of people they arrest from a few hundred per day to at least 12 to 1,500. With the idea being each of the agency's field offices should make 75 arrests per day. And For all of this administration's promises of a worst first strategy where they focus on those with criminal histories, as a former director of ICE pointed out 3 months ago, that was always unlikely to last.
Sarah Saldana believes if arrest numbers don't increase as rapidly as the administration hopes, it might abandon the worst first strategy and begin targeting community locations like day labor sites.
That is really a big concern of mine because that's not again, a stretch to think that might happen next. If the numbers are not coming through, let's get the low-hanging fruit.
Right, and you should avoid low-hanging fruit. I tried to do that. If I were to constantly go for low-hanging fruit, I'd say that worst first doesn't describe Trump's immigration policy so much as it describes his children. But again, I've avoided saying that because I have standards, so I won't do it. And the administration now seems desperate to scoop anyone up. Police in places like upstate New York have been stopping Hispanic drivers for minor traffic violations, and if they're undocumented, handing them over to Border Patrol agents. Also, at one point, tens of thousands of people received emails explicitly telling them to please leave the United States immediately. Some of those were sent by mistake to American citizens, while others went to migrants with a legal right to be here. The fact is, what the administration is doing is sometimes targeted, sometimes arbitrary, usually blatantly racist, and always cruel, and sometimes breathtakingly so.
Tonight, the administration is facing criticism from migrant advocates over the removal of 2 American citizen children of an undocumented woman from Honduras, including her 4-year-old son. A migrant rights group says he was sent to Honduras without his medication for stage 4 cancer. How is going after families with young kids targeting the worst of the worst?
First of all, we said we're going to prioritize the worst of the worst.
You feel like that's what you're doing?
Absolutely. But when you prioritize something, it doesn't mean you forget about everybody else. I've said from day one, if you're in the country with you, you're not off the table.
Okay, first, Tom Homan can truly rot in hell, though I'd expect nothing less from a man who clearly answered the question, what would Shrek look like as a white ogre? And while the government insists that woman chose to have her son deported with her, her lawyers insist that was not, in fact, the case. And either way, between the government putting that kid on a plane without his medication and the cuts to research at the NIH, it seems this administration's actively coming out pro-pediatric cancer. Well, there's a non-zero chance Trump's about to add a fucking brain tumour to his cabinet, and then presumably RFK's either going to eat it or point at it and say, it's from Wi-Fi. One of the boldest moves they've made to circumvent due process is invoking what's called the Alien Enemies Act, a 1798 that allows the president to detain or deport non-citizens without a hearing based only on their country of birth or citizenship if he decides that an invasion or predatory incursion by that country is underway. It was famously used to justify the internment of Japanese, Italian, and German immigrants in World War II. But Trump has now invoked it again, saying it lets us do a lot of the things we wouldn't be able to do. He's issued an absurd proclamation declaring a Venezuelan gang called Tren de Aragua, or TDA, has invaded the United States. And he's used that as a pretext to sweep people up in waves, label them as gang members, and deport them. Some have been shipped off to Secot, a notorious mega prison in El Salvador. And if you've only seen it in Trump's propaganda videos or in Kristi Noem's grotesque photo op, it is worth knowing just how grim it is in there.
Inmates are assigned to one of 8 sectors, each roughly the size of an airplane hangar, basically prisons within the prison. Once inside, it's said to be a life sentence. They'll never leave their assigned sector. Each sector holds more than 24 large cells, roughly 80 inmates per cell, but that can fluctuate. Inside each cell, toilets, a concrete basin for bathing, and a barrel of drinking water. Several rows of metal bunk beds. No mattresses, no sheets, no privacy.
Yeah, it is awful in there. The Salvadoran Justice and Security Minister has even bragged that no one who enters the Secot will ever walk out. They will only be able to leave in a coffin. And you'll only be able to leave in a coffin is a horrifying statement no matter where it is. Even if it was on a sign outside a literal coffin dealership, it'd be a bit much. I get you're just trying to make a sale, but come on, tone it down. And look, sending anyone there is unforgivable, whatever they're accused of. But it's worth noting, we've not only done it without due process, in many cases we've done it without cause. Remember, on those first plane loads, 3/4 of the people had no discernible criminal record. While Tom Homan has insisted that that doesn't mean anything because a lot of gang members don't have criminal histories, you clearly shouldn't be sending people to a Central American forever dungeon just on vibes. And the government's evidence in some of these cases is just absurdly weak. Take Andre Hernandez Romero, a Venezuelan stylist who's in the middle of seeking asylum in the US to escape persecution for his